Hello. Welcome to Fireside Creators. I am Reverend Dr. Sherry Palace, and it's a new week. It's a new subject, and I am so glad to be here with this guest and this panel that we have tonight. Go ahead and you have the rights for comments. Let's see here. Where are my notes? If you are on YouTube, go ahead and hit subscribe, like, all that good stuff. If you are in Facebook, go ahead and register with StreamYard so I can see your name. I want to thank our sponsors because without them, I wouldn't be doing this show. Their support means the world to me. And if you like this show and would like to support it and me, go to sherrypalace.com and use the support tab. And there's all different kinds of options where you can support me as little as a cup of coffee. And if you like the show, I would really appreciate your support. Your generosity, I'm giving you some stuff like VIP access to the panel and other stuff that, I don't know. I tried to do something for your generosity and for your support. So I hope you like it. Tonight's show is on paganism, and I really hope that you learn something because I learn something every show. With this, the Salem witch trials were justified when I was growing up. If not justified, at a minimum excused because they were witches. I met my first witch before I met my first Jewish person. Her name was Kim, and she was a badass. She wasn't a badass because she was a witch. She was a badass because that was just her demeanor. She was a Wiccan witch from Fresno, and it really dispelled a lot of the negative connotations that I had growing up. I mean, look at the Wizard of Oz, right? We have the Wicked Witch from the West who resembles a demon or Satan and has the flying monkeys. And then we have the Good Witch, and she resembled more of an angel. So we have all of these negative connotations of Satan versus angels and all of this stuff with paganism and especially with witchcraft. So I want to dispel a lot of those misnomers. We eliminate the fear, eliminate the shame, eliminate any justification for burning people at the stake. So that's what tonight's show is going to be on. And I'm really excited to introduce the panel. First, we have Gabriel West. He is an educator and a poet from Florida. He is an Ovate grade member of the Order of the Bards, Ovates, and Druids. I'm probably saying this wrong. And has been following the path of druidry for 4 years. Welcome, Gabriel. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Sherry.
What did I say wrong?
No, nothing. That was perfect.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Next we have, where is it? There you are. Kirsten Faisal, who has been a neo-pagan for over 50 years, so it's probably more than just a phase. In the past, she has led private Wiccan circles, public discussion groups, organized public celebrations, been out of the broom closet spokesman to the media, edited a neo-pagan newsletter, and was a member of the ADF, our own druidry. She is currently solitary, reads tarot and tea leaves, and offers bottles of wine to the local spirits where she lives. Isn't that a great bio? Welcome, Kirsten.
Hi, how are you?
I am well. How are you?
I'm good. It's a good evening.
And for those, Kirsten might look familiar because she is an avid follower of the show, and so I appreciate her appearance tonight. It's super cool. So we have a lot of things to talk about. First of all, I would like to see how you guys, let me remove all of these banners. Let's talk about first, what is it? What is paganism? I mean, even in scheduling the show, I made a huge error by talking about ancient paganism. And Is that Nina?
I muted my phone. I did not mute my daughter's.
Okay, I just want to have looking around.
And it's clear over there.
Okay,
Oh,
no
man.
worries. So, I mean, I tried to associate ancient paganism with modern paganism and actually ended up offending somebody. Even in scheduling this, I am learning new things. So let's start with the top. What is it and what does the terms mean? Let's start with you, Gabriel.
Well, sure. I'm looking forward to learning more from Kirsten on this topic myself because, I'm relatively new to the path myself. But, to me, paganism is kind of a catch-all term for a lot of different spiritualities. So I think, when you are talking about paganism, it's difficult to say anything in general, right? We have, you talked about Wiccans, I practice druidry, there's heathenry, there's a lot of other types of spirituality within this umbrella. I think
so let's stop there.
Yeah.
What's druidry?
Well, we were joking a little bit offline. I think that if you asked 9 druids that question, you would probably get 10 different answers, right?
Okay.
So the particular kind of druidry that I practice is oftentimes called revivalist druidry. And it actually, it takes a lot of inspiration from the ancient druids that you read about in accounts from Julius Caesar or in accounts from archaeologists about the pagan faith of the Celtic lands of Western Europe. So, talking about Ireland, of course, Scotland, Wales, Gaul, which is now France. But while, the revivalist druids take a lot of inspiration from those stories and those archetypes, we are not necessarily looking to recreate or reconstruct their practices. We're very much interested in kind of having a spirituality that meets the needs of modern people. And so I belong to the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, which is kind of, I think, probably the largest group worldwide in terms of the revivalist druidry camp. It was founded kind of in the 1950s and 60s by a guy named Ross Nichols, who was super good friends with Gerald Gardner, who was the founder of Wicca. So there's kind of a lot of spiritual heritage in common there. We observe the same 8 Shabbats that Wiccans do. So, the 2 solstices, the 2 equinoxes, the 4 fire festivals. We're a very, very earth-centered spirituality. The environment and taking care of nature are absolute top of the priority list. Beyond that, we don't tend to insist on too many theological points. We have a very big tent in terms of beliefs. Within druidry, we have polytheists and monotheists and folks who are both druid and Wiccan, and folks who combine druidry with their agnosticism and just openness to whatever is out there in the universe. So we, like I said, are a big tent. I think, you'll find a lot of practices are popular within that tent. A lot of beliefs, we tend to be folks who believe more in things like magic and reincarnation. Those aren't dogmas. We don't insist on those things. We welcome people that don't see those as part of their paths. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question too well there, but
I think so.
That's just coming from my very, very narrow sector of the huge pagan family, the huge druid family even. So there are so many perspectives out there. Yeah,
I think the same can go for any belief.
for sure.
Kirsten, what is, I have a typo in there. That's great.
That's okay.
I wanted to know what it is. What is it and what does the term mean to you?
Sure. I'm gonna build on what Gabriel just said because
Okay.
that was a great skeleton, if you will. I like to think of it as a tree. Imagine that. So to me, I separate, when you said that you accidentally offended someone, I often use the term neo-paganism to separate what we do, like this particular spiritual movement, from traditions that are continuous, that have never have never died out. So Hinduism is a great example of a continuous tradition, and there are traditions that would be called pagan all over the world that are continuous. But what this particular tree umbrella is rooted in is mostly those pre-Christian traditions of Europe. So sometimes there's borrowings from other places, stones from the sacred sites of previous peoples, and drug them forward to build new ones. And so we're looking to say, what is useful there? What is important there? What can we learn there? And what can we bring it forward to make it be meaningful today in our societies? And so that tree, that's the roots. And yes, pretty much starting, the seeds were kind of planted, depending on which branch. 40s and 50s was a real, like, that's when it really began to take root. And then the big blossom happened in the 60s and the 70s in the United States, a little bit earlier in England, but it really took off with a lot of the other social change movements that were happening in the United States in the 60s and 70s. And so if you look at that tree, you have a very broad Wiccan branch. You have a broad druid branch. You have a broad branch that's based on Norse beliefs. There's a very strong thread through all of this of feminism and environmentalism, all of these different things, particularly coming together in the United States to create a broad social movement, if you will. And I've heard the term, and I love this, that we are not so much traditions of orthodoxy. We don't really care what people believe, but we are traditions of orthopraxy, that we do things together in the same ways.
Oh.
So, yeah, so we do. So typically you'll find a focus on the earth and the seasons of the earth. Typically the celebrations are the same and they focus on seasonal changes. Typically there's a, when you said Wiccan and witch, not everybody uses that. To me, witchcraft is a practice,
Okay.
and it's a practice of changing reality to conform with your will, right? And
okay.
yeah. And to me, it's really a form of three-dimensional prayer. And what I mean by that is someone else might, we were just talking about how dry it is, might pray for rain. I might have that in terms of thinking and have words that go with it, but I might also have other three-dimensional things in my space that are used to call that water energy to be present with me. So I might have a bowl of water. I might have a candle. I might have other things that represent water and the earth receiving water. I might pour a bottle of wine out on a tree. So those kinds of trying to change reality to conform with my will, and there's a lot of ethics there, but a lot of ethics there we can talk about. That is a magical practice. Not everybody does that particular practice.
Okay.
But that sense of the earth is sacred, and whatever sacredness is, it is within us and around us. And we can, it takes many forms. And so some pagans are going to say, well, I'm really kind of a monotheist. I see everything as all part of one giant thing. Some of those would say that they are panentheists. In other words, there's the world, and then the sacred is not only in the world, but it also surrounds the world, and it's something even greater than the world. Some would say they're pantheists, where the sacred is in the world and it's not something separate from it. Some would say, I don't know. But the pantheist, I'm a pantheist on odd days, and I'm a panentheist on even days of the year. Those are beliefs that are very common throughout.
Literally, you're one on odd days and one on even days, or is that a joke?
That's a joke.
Okay, good. I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
Yeah, no, I go back and forth.
Yeah, okay. I get that. I get that emotional roller coaster too. Okay, so that leads us into the next question. What are the practices? Gabriel, I'll start with you again.
Sure. Boy, that's a great question. And I think that, once again, it's going to vary as just as many variations as there are in beliefs. There's probably just as many variations in practices, right? I know for myself, kind of practicing in the revivalist end of druidry, I have certain rituals that I practice. A lot of them would probably look familiar to a lot of pagans, involving the lighting of candles, the pouring out of libations, like Kirsten mentioned, offering prayers. Sometimes it just looks like grabbing my oldest son and going for a really long hike in the woods and just kind of being in awe of nature and not trying to put words to what we're feeling, just experiencing it. So, yeah, to Kirsten's point earlier, some of those practices for a lot of folks do involve magic. Again, that's not, I don't think any of us want to be gatekeepers on that. And it's that, if you want to be a part of this spirituality, that's something you have to do. It's something that many of us choose to do. I myself tend towards kind of a lot of more natural magic, using things like herbs and plants and stuff like that towards healing and stuff like that. But there's folks who are more into ceremonial magic, kind of more what you would associate with like the traditional Western occult practices and stuff like that. But like I said, we really run the gamut, and I know I'm leaving out a lot of folks here. I know that I have friends that are heathens, and obviously using runes kind of is a very important practice to them. Divination, I know Kirsten mentioned that she practices tarot. Divination is something that's a pretty common thread throughout all pagan practices, I would say. So whether you're using tarot or geomancy or runes or whatever tool you choose to use, that tends to be pretty common. Boy, I could keep rambling for a while, but
I'd like to just interject about how much paganism is interwoven into the Western religions. I mean, we have the candles. One of the things that I found in studying the Bible was their adversity to, my mind just went blank, incense.
Sure.
It's like they had this crazy thing about not doing incense. It's burning the candles, Christmas, Easter, all of those being on the solstice. So when we talk about these types of things, while they tend to raise the hair on people's backs when we say these types of things, it's already incorporated into our everyday beliefs. This is why Christmas is on the winter solstice. This is why Easter is associated with the spring solstice. We have all of these things, and they have been incorporated forever. Right. One of the things I have a question about is it safe to say, in the complete general sense, that paganism would be considered anything outside of the structure of Western religions going back in history? I know that there's 4,000 religions now and that they all have the offshoots. But back in history, anything outside of the Western religions would be considered paganism, right?
Well,
is that safe to say?
I don't want to even exclude the traditional Western religions. There are a lot of folks that consider themselves to be Christo-pagan or, who practice Jewish witchcraft or, so on and so forth. I myself, I grew up evangelical. At some point in my early 20s, switched to Catholicism, and then, later chose to walk the druidry path. Although my beliefs don't resemble what they once did in any way, I've kind of chosen not to give up all of the spiritual relationships that I had from those years, if that makes sense. So, I still occasionally pray to the Virgin Mary. Still have a few other saints that I'm fairly friendly with. I don't strongly identify with that part of my past, but I know that there are a lot of folks that do. So I don't, as we're trying to kind of, get a handle on what the term paganism means, I don't want to exclude those kind of more traditional structures either. And to your point, Sherry, there are a lot of syncretistic practices within the mainstream Western traditions, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, my gosh, like, you know, where would 75% of Catholic practices be without paganism, right?
Well, technically, the laying of hands is magic. Let's just put
Sure,
that out
absolutely.
there. You know, it's,
Absolutely.
when people go, oh,
And if you read scholars of magic, they will point out that, you know, whoever structured the Christian liturgies, you know, be they, you know, the Western Latin Rite Mass or some of the Eastern Divine liturgies from the Orthodox, whoever structured those knew what they were doing from a magical standpoint.
yeah,
You know, an author I read sometimes, John Michael Greer, who's a druid from another part of the druid family, talks about that quite often and says, you know, yeah, they, from a magical perspective, from an occult perspective, these guys knew what they were doing when they wrote these.
Kirsten?
Absolutely. I mean, that process of religious syncretism, of religious change, again, building on the bones of what was already there, is again a universal human thing that happens. So it was easier in Europe. Again, if we focus just there, it was easier in Europe to convert people to Christianity if they took a look at whatever they could locally and say, okay, this site that is a sacred site, and well, now it's a church, and this, you know, this day, which was a sacred, and let's just say, when the Romans invaded Britain, they did the exact same things. This well that was sacred to this Celtic, now it's a Roman god. That is the process of religious change that humans go through.
The evolution that most religions deny.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, yeah, well, there's a little anthropology that might say things work different. You know what, as far as practice, as we're kind of in this space, let me just take you through a typical Wiccan circle.
Okay.
We would call it a circle. So usually there's a process by which you, there'll be a space with room for everybody to stand in a circle, but you start with people outside the circle. And this process of creating sacred space happens, and it might be actually drawing on the ground or laying some kind of like cornmeal or something on the ground to say this space for right now is outside of our normal everyday lives. We're going to focus our thoughts and our energy here. This is sacred space, and we're going to become aware of its sacredness. And so then people would come in, they would become part of this circle. So there's an entry and a realization that this is different. There might be a cleansing or a blessing as part of that. Again, I'm stepping from one part of my life into another part of my life, which would be not that different from entering a Catholic church and hitting that holy water. So very similar ideas and processes, and moving people's consciousness in very same ways. Then everyone's in the circle. Typically, then there's a point where people call the quarters or call the elements to be present. And again, that's an acknowledgement of all the different parts of life. So you would call fire, air, earth, and water to be part of the circle. And each one of those are assigned a different direction. And it might be seen as literal spirits that represent that, or just the elements, you name it. But there's some kind of, again, we are part of this space. We are part of the earth. And then the center of all of this is whatever sacredness you want to focus on. So it might be particular deities, you name it. You also welcome the center and the sacredness into that space. Then after all of that has happened, then it can vary according to the purpose of that celebration. Maybe it's just purely celebratory. If it's a holiday, it could be anything from a little play showing a myth, acting out a myth that's associated with that day. It could be somebody who does some readings. It could be, you name it. And then focusing, let's say it's a healing one. It could be then focusing healing energy and trying to raise people's energy, raise their prayer energy, you name it, towards healing somebody or healing the earth, right? And that energy is targeted. So that energy is raised, then you have to ground it back into the earth, or target it towards what it's targeted towards. Then there's a time of, hey, we're part of a community and we have cakes and ale. We share food, just like you go down to the church basement and you have coffee and maple long johns. And then after that, you thank everybody. You thank the elements for being there. You thank the deities for being there and for their blessings. And you open the circle and you're done. So those elements, if you just look at what they're doing, are so similar in sacred worship all around the world. That's how people move in and out of sacred space.
One of the things that I loved in studying some of the pagan beliefs was the democracy of the face. My head kept breaking because my Christian brain kept looking for the God. You know, there has to be the top God, there has to be the one, and seeing that everybody was equal and was valued was not only a foreign concept to me, of course, coming again from the Christian evangelical brain, but it was so cool because I had never even considered something like that before, of the equality of the beliefs, of the natural things. The other thing, I wrote these down, sorry. Hold on. The fan blew my notes. The other thing I really like about paganism is that it is one of the faiths that actually applauds and honors God's creation. So many of the Western beliefs, frankly, despise or kill so much of our planet and so much of God's creation. And paganism honors all of that, which I just love. I think that it needs to, everything. The Bible says, all that have breath, praise the Lord, right? But yet we have completely forgotten about all of that and the honor that we should be giving to all of them. The other thing I had was I just watched a documentary on the Knights Templar and discovered that they were one of the big fans of the pentagram, which is, when I was in high school, there was this area in a park near my house where they had stumps of wood, and in the inside was a pentagram. And that was known for the Satan worshipers. These were the Satan worshipers who went there and, you stayed away on the weekends and all of those things. And it was kind of like finding out about the swastika and realizing that for thousands of years, it was a peaceful symbol that had been hijacked by the Nazis. And I think the same goes for the pentagram, right? Because the five-pointed star had so much holiness to it for so long. And now, I see Christians literally shudder when they see it. What is that explanation for that?
Yeah, it's funny because when you look into the history of the pentagram, right, to your point, it predates Christianity, and Christianity adopted it and used it for quite some time, and then now it's become this anathematized thing. Man, I think the explanation is, to your point earlier about the need within evangelicalism to kind of expunge anything that even kind of looks pagan, right? Whether it be incense or candles or saints or anything like that, right? I think the pentagram just got caught up in all of that. I remember, kind of probably similar to your experiences with the tree with the pentagram carved in it. I remember growing up evangelical during the great satanic panic of the 1980s and 90s. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Where there was a demon hiding under every rock and tree, right?
And album.
And
album for sure. And every role-playing game and every Harry Potter novel and all that stuff, right? My goodness, like I wasn't allowed to trick or treat as a kid. We didn't, Halloween was the devil's holiday, all that good stuff. So, it's fear. It's fear of the other. It's
fear of the unknown.
Fear of the unknown. The fear that your nice, neatly packaged answer to all of life's questions might not be correct. It's just fear, I think.
So let's talk about what it means to most of us that actually use it, and that is it's got 5 points. So fire, air, earth, water, spirit. So so it represents all of the elements that make up life within the circle of life.
Wow.
It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple.
And very satanic to me.
Yeah, and sometimes people say, well, if it's pointing upright, then it's the good witch circle, and if the one point is downwards, then that's the satanic one, and that's not really true either, because some people use in their magical practice it's upright if it's gathering in and drawing magic, and down if it's dispelling magic, right? Okay. So even which direction it's pointed, it is kind of irrelevant within neo-pagan circles. It's a symbol. It's a powerful symbol because it's kind of the model of the world that we use, and it's very simple. I'm very familiar with the Satanism scare.
Worth noting too that
good or evil, black or white.
I got married during that, and my partner wore a pentacle ring, and he had invited his clients to come to our wedding, which was a pagan wedding, and he was reported at one point for being a Satanist. It's like, well, first of all, you can't report somebody for being a Satanist because, freedom of religion. Yeah. But he had to explain why he wasn't a Satanist, he was something else. And even if he was a Satanist, chill. And people did end up coming to our wedding, and guess what? It was a lovely affair.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
it's worth noting too that, from our perspective, and I guess I shouldn't say from a lot of pagan perspectives, Satanism is a branch of Christianity, because we don't, Satan is from the Christian Bible. Wow. That's not something that pagan mythologies or pagan legends that character doesn't appear in our stories. Like that's somebody that comes from the Christian Bible. So, call it upside down Christianity, inverted Christianity, whatever. But I don't believe in Satan, but Christians do. So
yeah, it's irrelevant to me because it's not part of my belief. So that's not my problem to deal with. It's completely irrelevant.
I've come to believe that any belief outside or blaming anything outside of ourselves leads to just chaos and problems and a lack of accountability. Yeah. When we can blame an outside source like Satan, that's where that comes in. Mm-hmm. I want to post what Michelle said, because this I think is a great tip.
Sure.
Are you familiar with this book?
Yeah. Read it many years ago. I don't remember a whole lot about it, but yeah.
Well, I'll definitely have to add that to my list.
There's another one too. Let me look at my Goodreads real quick, kind of on that similar note. See if I can find it while we're continuing the conversation.
While you're doing that, Kirsten, what led you to this belief system?
Well, I, like many people that I've talked to within it over the years, say, well, I just came home. They'll talk about, I always believed these things. And then I figured out that there were other people who had the same thoughts I did, which is very similar to what I did. I had an unusual background. My biological father was Catholic. He was killed in Vietnam when I was an infant. My mother is kind of a generic Protestant. And when I was very small, she married a Saudi Muslim man. And so for my biological father's honor, to respect him, she tried to raise me as a Catholic, though she was Protestant and my dad is Muslim. So they would send me to catechism classes, and then I would come home and she would say, what did you learn? And I would tell her, and then she'd say, okay. And then let me tell you what I believe. And then you go ask your dad what he believes and you figure out what you want to believe.
I like that. That a lot.
Yeah, so that's how I was raised. And it's actually, for me, maybe it's part of the reason why I have always had kind of an ecumenical focus and am very curious about all kinds of beliefs. But this idea, I can't think of a time I wasn't doing spell work, and I started to read tarot cards in elementary school.
Wow.
And so then certainly by the time I was a teenager, I was focused on old gods. And I didn't know that there was anybody else that thought that. And I was writing stories with, well, I'll be really direct. I was writing stories with vampires who believed in the old gods, because that had been when they believed, and they were coming, and they were in our modern times, and they were talking about that. And that was my way of, through fiction, finding words for what I was believing, right?
I like that.
Bringing the past forward. And then when I was 18, I ran into Starhawk. And if you're going to recommend a book, I would recommend any of Starhawk's writings, Spiral Dance or Dreaming the Dark in particular, for people who are wanting an introduction. And that just exploded my world, attended my first circle, and haven't strayed from the path since. So there you go.
That's awesome.
What led you, Gabriel?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll start by saying I found the book on my Goodreads. It's called Pagans and Christians: The Personal Spiritual Experience by Gus D. Zarega. And Gus is a Gardnerian Wiccan. Just a brilliant book if you're interested in kind of exploring that overlap between paganism and Christianity. What led me? So, like I mentioned earlier, I grew up within Christianity. Reached a point in my 20s when it just was not fulfilling my spiritual needs. Felt very hollow. Went through what some of us call a deconstruction process, right? A letting go of a lot of what I had believed growing up, and kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, went out shopping and exploring what I did believe and exploring what was going to meet my spiritual needs. And there was a day when I was out with my children at a place here in Pinellas County, Florida, called Boyd Hill Nature Preserve. And it's a place that is just stunningly gorgeous. It's if you're traveling through St. Petersburg, Florida, it's urban. And then all of a sudden, Boyd Hill is 250 acres of just pure, pristine Florida wildlife. And I took my kids because my dad had taken me when I was very small, 3-4 years old. And being there in Boyd Hill kind of touched a place in my heart that I don't always have access to, if that makes sense. And I felt a stronger sense of the divine than I had in church in many years. And I sort of left that experience saying, okay, whatever's next for me in my path needs to be earth-centered. It needs to be a spirituality that's focused on nature. And I just kind of started researching what that meant. Felt drawn towards druidry very early on in that process. I think, a lot of it had to do with having kind of grown up in a family with Irish background. I had read a lot of Celtic mythology as a kid, and had kind of had that archetype of the druid kind of from the stories and myths that I read as a kid, and felt very drawn towards that. Spent about a year just kind of doing my own thing with that, and then eventually joined up with the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. Started taking their correspondence course and adopting some of their practices into my own practices. And yeah, I've loved it ever since.
We have a question. In fact, if you could type it into the private chat, then I will post it in the banner.
Absolutely. I will do that right now.
And that way we can do that. And while he's doing that, we got to it. We got to the last question. How does it benefit you and the world, Kirsten?
It benefits me, I think, the same way that many people are benefited by their faith. It gives me a perspective of things that are broader than myself. It focuses me towards caring about the world, caring about the people around me, caring about the earth. And right now, we need a heck of a lot of people caring about the earth.
Yeah.
When I mentioned ethics earlier, there is an ethic of what you do comes back to you 3 times. And
3 times.
Yes, 3
so that's
times.
beyond the karmic, the what you sow shall you reap. It's 3 times.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What you do comes back to you 3 times. And so what do I want to put out into the world? How do I want to treat other people? So it gives me guideposts for making decisions. It's a way of, honestly, it gives me joy. It centers me and gives me peace. I don't think it's any different than what other people get from their faith.
I was just going to say that. I mean, that's what people look for in their faith, right?
Yeah. And so I find that centeredness in deciduous woods. That's my space. And that's where I feel most connected. And I feel most of the divine. I too had an experience. It was after a car accident where, the world shattered. And I was like, okay, what do you do now? Well, I guess you're supposed to pray. I don't know. And
it's okay.
I've always got wildlife with me. I have a dog, 3 cats, a bird, and a lizard. So,
I got your bird on your shoulder.
I always say there's always an animal touching my body somewhere. But I felt a presence come and comfort me, and that presence was absolutely female. It was absolutely a mother feeling surrounding me and just saying, you know what, it'll be okay. And it was. So I get the same things everybody else gets.
One of the sayings that I like the most is, if you want to understand God, look to nature. And so many Western religions forget that, because we have totally emancipated ourselves from nature, and look at any honoring of is woke or tree huggers or something like that. And then you look at trees who have been here for 2,000-3,000 years. That deserves honor. They give us oxygen. They do all of those things. And when we discount nature, we make a god into more of a human being rather than a creator of all. Gabriel?
Yeah.
How does it benefit you in the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think restoring that sense of sacredness to nature is so important, both for myself and my own spiritual path. Being able to connect with the natural world is something that I didn't necessarily have within evangelicalism growing up, because it is such a disembodied faith. It is a faith that looks down on the quote unquote world, right? So restoring those connections is healing for me on a personal level. And I think it's so crucial for the world at large, because we are in a day and age of environmental crisis. We are, as we were talking before the show, experiencing the devastating consequences of global warming already. And restoring that sense of sacredness to nature, I think, is something that's desperately needed if we're going to make any progress in that regard. I think, we've tried appealing to people's own self-interest, and I don't know that it works. We've tried appealing to people's sense of ethics, and I think that kind of sort of works sometimes. People will occasionally feel bad about plastic waste in the ocean or something like that. Not enough to really change a whole lot in their lifestyles. But I think if we restore the sense that, nature is sacred, we don't cut down that tree because that tree is sacred. We don't put pollution in the ocean because the ocean is sacred. And whatever theology you want to attach to that, whether there are, local gods and goddesses over the rivers and the forest, or whether there's, more of a panentheist take, like Kirsten mentioned earlier. I think restoring that sense of sacredness to nature is absolutely vital. I also think, to a point that both of you made earlier, getting in touch with the feminine side of the divine, or the divine feminine, is absolutely crucial. I read a lot of Joseph Campbell, and he talks about there's a book of this that he didn't write, but it's a collection of his writings called Goddesses, and he talks about sort of the evolution of religious belief surrounding gods and goddesses, and about how as we progressed into the Bronze Age, Yahweh lost his wife, right? I think it was Asherah that was originally Yahweh's wife within mythology, and eventually.
We did a show on that a couple weeks ago, actually.
Oh, did you really? Okay,
the divine feminine.
Excellent. Yeah. So, there's a really easy line to trace, I think, between saying that God is only male to, a lot of the toxic masculinity that we have in our culture. It's unbalanced. It's unhealthy.
One of the things that I found so interesting about that conversation is I expected it to be about the divine feminine, about women. Sure. We actually ended up talking more about the adverse effects that it had with men.
Yeah.
And we forget that. We think, okay, well, if it's a god, if it's woman, we'll align with the feminine. But in degrading the femininity in men and making it negative and evil and all of those things, or just disregarding it altogether, created emotional harm on men also.
Absolutely.
So when we discard the femininity, which is another thing that I love about the paganism, it hurts both sexes. It hurts everybody, because there's not
absolutely. And I think too, to make another point that Joseph Campbell makes, it contributes to that disconnection from nature, right? Because, in a lot of mythologies you have, the father god is represented by the sky and mother goddess is represented by the earth. Well, if you don't have a goddess, then you don't have an earth, right? Yeah. And if you're not connected to the goddess, you're not connected to the natural world around you. And so it hurts both sexes in that regard too.
I mean, I think that in some respects, we still feminize the earth in terms of Mother Earth, and we have that within our cultural symbolism that the earth is female. But if we look at the violence against women in our culture, if you can rape women, you can rape the earth.
Yeah.
If women are lesser than it is okay to treat the earth as lesser than. If it's okay to use women, it is okay to use the earth. And so in raising up and equalizing the role of the feminine in all of us, the role of the feminist in all genders, the role of the feminist in feminism in the divine, you're also saying, you know what, violence against women isn't okay, and
right.
Violence against the earth is not okay.
Right, absolutely.
It's interesting how that all goes hand in hand. I mean, humans are the only one that destroy our habitat. No other creature on Earth destroys their habitat. And one of my favorite, I think it's a GIF, where the trees, all the different trees are moving, and you can see them honor each other's space and moving. Or when they take a satellite view and they can see the changes where the Earth is breathing. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but those are really powerful images. I mean, it appears to be breathing because of the changes in seasons and stuff like that. It's not actually breathing, but to see that life that we have discarded, that life that in so many other aspects are superior to us. I mean, I always use the elephant as an example, where an elephant will stop and mourn a stranger for days.
Yeah.
And a human will walk over him on the sidewalk, complain that they're in their way. It's nature has the purity, the sacredness that we look for in so many aspects, but then we dismiss it and say, oh, it's beneath us because we are to rule.
Absolutely. I'll say one more thing too, that I think that paganism contributes both to me and to the broader community, and that's to kind of use Carl Jung's phrase, incorporating the shadow. I think when I was growing up, and certainly not all Christian traditions are guilty of this, but the particular Christian branches to which I've belonged in my past, there's a denial of the shadow. There's a denial of the emotions of sadness and grief and anger, despair. And reincorporating that into my spiritual life has been profoundly healing for me in a lot of ways, and allowed me to acknowledge those feelings and to welcome them, and to to be back in touch with the shadow side, the part of myself that I've learned to not like, the part of myself that I've learned to suppress over the years. Has been powerful. And I think we as a society, particularly here in America, everything's got to be great all the time. Everything's amazing. We're so like we're all we do is win. Like and it's
Lies.
profoundly unhealthy, right?
Yeah,
And we,
lies.
and I remember going to church as a kid, and things were not okay in my life. I had a lot of trauma in my childhood, and I had to pretend that none of that was happening at church,
Yeah.
because the joy of the Lord is my strength, and I had to smile big and be happy for Jesus. And man, like, just the ability to acknowledge that not everything's okay. Wow. And we need to get there, I think, as individuals and as a society, particularly here in America, but the West in general, I'd say.
Yeah, that brings me back to Kim, the girl I spoke about that I met as a teenager. One of the things that made her a badass is her realness.
Yeah.
Because I came from the same background of the fake smiles and everything's happy, she was so real. And I had never met anybody like that before. I mean, she walked and she was a presence. She was, not tall, she was average looking. If you were to see her from across the street, she was average in every single way. If you were to speak to her, she was damn right intimidating, because she was so secure, because she was so real, and everybody honored her for that.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things in looking at her going, okay, this is totally the antithesis of everything I've ever heard about Wiccan or, witchcraft or anything like this. How can I justify these two things when I look at Kim? I want to be like her. I want that strength. Because as a Christian female, I was, demurred and summoned, and she just owned it. I didn't want to become a Wiccan. I just wanted that honesty that she embodied. And I think that's part of paganism. I think, a lot of Western religions tell us to remove ourselves, to deny ourselves. We are, horrible people, and paganism celebrates all of that.
Including focus on sexuality as being a positive thing.
Yeah.
That, it's part of being this human animal. We all eat, we all poop, we all are born in blood and mucus. We all die. We all decay.
Yeah.
This is life, and it is all part of this amazing circle. I don't think, I think many of us have some kind of belief in reincarnation, and I honestly, again, alternate Tuesdays, I'll figure out what I believe about the afterlife, because again, the afterlife isn't a huge focus. This life right here for me is sacred. Yeah. And I'm not trying to escape this life. Yeah. Everything that I need for beauty and sacred is right here. Everything we need for peace and to feed everybody and is right here, right now. The only thing that's lacking is our will. Heaven is right here, right now, if we will it to be. And we just don't. Instead, we reject it. And we're hoping for some future where we can have all those things. I want to come right back here because this is heaven. I just have to will it to be and get everybody else to will it to be as well.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I just love the nature. I love the unity. I mean, those are the types of things that should be in all religions about a higher power, to be honoring all of those things. And sex, if we get right down to it, sex was criminalized per se, or, became the deadly sin because of pagan rituals, because sex was celebrated. It was a temple ritual. They were temple prostitutes. Sex was part of that reaching God. So Western religions came in and said, no, that's bad. and took one of the greatest gifts of life that we have and made it about force, control, everything that sex isn't supposed to be.
Yeah, agreed.
So we are at the top of the hour already. David, the post is going to go up at 8 o'clock or in 4 minutes with the link to the VIP. Gabriel cannot stay for very long.
Nice.
Told you.
He wants to be seen. But do we have any questions from the audience? We posted all the books. I will go through and post those again. And then you can always go back on replay for this also. And then Tim had that one. And Michelle, thank you for that one.
Yeah.
Okay, to wrap it up. Gabriel, you first. Final thoughts. Where can people find you?
Sure. Yeah, well, thank you so much for letting me participate. I feel like I've
You're
learned
awesome.
a lot
Thank you.
from Kirsten, and I'm super excited to chat for a little bit. I'll stick around in the VIP lounge for a few minutes, but yeah, find me on Instagram at Gabriel West Wanders. I like to write poetry. In particular, I like to take a picture that I've taken and kind of try to respond to it in free verse. And I post other pagan-y stuff from time to time, but would love to talk with anybody offline if they want to reach out to me through that Instagram account.
Fantastic. Kirsten?
You can find me on Facebook with the name Kirsten Faisal. I do violence against women work, and most of my presence in the social media world is about that. But I'm always happy to answer questions and chat, whether it's about violence against women or paganism, you name it.
Doing good in this world all over the place. I appreciate you. I appreciate you both. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm going to boot you backstage and then stay there because I'm going to give you the link to the VIP. But thank you so much. This was a great conversation, and I can't wait to continue it in our VIP body.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, you guys.
All right. See ya.
Another great show. David, thanks. I have given up trying to control my hair, so I just kind of did this. I'm all about go with the flow. And I'm saying this because David made a comment about my hair, so I'm just not going out there. But, go with the flow. I'm tired of fighting my hair. I live in Florida. It's all about humidity, so thank you for the compliment. Next week, we're going to be talking about indigenous religions and shamanism, which is going to be another fabulous show. And I'm really looking forward to it. We've got 2 people up. I've got 1 spot if you know of anyone who would want to gain that spot and be on the panel. If you would like to join the VIP, please go to sherrypalace.com and let me put it up here for you. And go to the support tab. I appreciate your support. If you like the show and it entertains you and you learn things, I would love your support and to keep this going. And like I said, I try and give you cool stuff so you can come VIP and some wristbands and some shout outs and stuff like that for your generosity. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Fireside Creators. I am Reverend Dr. Sherry Palace, and have a beautiful week. I love you all. Thank you.